Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which would normally mean I do a how to bass, but instead I'm going to replace this with the making of Deathblow Part 3 sound design, which will include a whole bunch of cool bass. So I feel like that solves that fills that sort of satisfaction. It satisfies that desire, that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, this is the track. If you have not seen parts 1 and 2, I suggest you do, because I'm going to gloss over a lot of stuff that I covered in parts 1 and 2. Parts 1 and 2 being the arrangement, like why I arranged the way I did, and then part 1, and then part 2 being mixing and mastering. I'm not gonna talk about that. I'll talk about the sound design, which will include some manner of mixing in terms of some sounds. So yeah, let's just hop right in. I'll do this chronologically. So there's a lot going on right there. Way down here, we have a whole bunch of hits. We have this guy. That's just that. So this sample is actually originally, it's actually in FL stock. It's this guy. That dude, that's the sample. I've engaged a little bit of time stretching, so I made it a bit long, and then I cut off, I changed the input, the interface, so I didn't have, there's no real boom, because I do the boom with other things. I'm compressing it pretty heavily, just on the master. I just like the kind of compression you can do with Maximus on the master channel like that. It wasn't a big deal because it's a very diffuse sort of sound, and then big old huge boosts in these particular frequencies, because if you heard, there's not a lot going on in this general area, and it's pretty much where I wanted the main focus to be, and then I put it through 100% into Valhalla Shimmer, which is a totally bitchin' reverb plugin that does very special things, and this makes a very long, like a big-tailed, kind of long, sort of boomy sound. So that was that guy. It's being routed into the sidechain, then I believe. Nope, it's going straight to the master. So that just happens by itself. That was that guy, and then this dude is just a bass drop, I think. Yeah. Not a lot going on there. This guy is going into the sidechain, and then there's this dude. What's in here? SFX Big Tom. So that's the sound, and I resampled it into Harmer. Nuked SFX, and there's apparently supposed to be another sample in here that's not in here. That's weird. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but it doesn't appear to be having a large impact on the sound. Anyway, what I did here is that in the time knob, if we go to the envelope, that's odd. Maybe it was speed. That's totally supposed to be envelope, which defines speed. So it is defined speed. Okay, so yeah, so the speed starts off a little. It's a little bit slower than it would be anyway, and then the envelope comes down to be max value, and then it goes down to the minimum value. So that means that it progresses through the sample a little bit, but then as it gets to a certain spot, it stops. This is because I didn't want the actual tail to happen. I wanted it to hold the tail as long as I actually wanted the note to be held. So we get this sort of performance. And then the harmonics stay static. There's a lot of reverb. Like a lot of reverb. Some prism engaged. Like this is a very effecty kind of sound. I changed the harmonic use and pitch window to be this configuration just to kind of screw the harmonics as I put it in unison. Some phase and whatever. Like this is very a whatever kind of sound, because its point in life is to be very diffuse and reverby. And like it's actually kind of funny whenever someone asks me to do a tutorial on like a ambient sound or a pad or something, because most of the time the key to ambient sounds is just to reverb the hell out of it. It doesn't, like, it almost doesn't matter. Like, it kind of matters what you do to it, but it almost, like, in comparison to like bass design, it basically doesn't matter what you do to it. So big old reverb again with Valhalla Shimmer, some EQ, and this kind of complements the big whooshy thing with the SFX Disto sample, and that's also going out to the master. That's the Disto sample. What's this guy doing? Going to the sidechain channel. Cool. And so on top of that, we have a kick drum, but this is just the bass drum, and it's also being low passed. I covered this in the mixing and mastering because I also talked about the drum mastering. I used the bass drum to create the heaviest low end of the kick, and I used another kick drum to oh, there's new effects. Huh. So that was the other sound that was supposed to go into Harmer. I guess it didn't get loaded for some reason. And there's my top kick. So I have that top kick and I have the bass drum as my bottom kick, but I am low passing it. I low pass it twice, which is why I have 2 filters, but that's just because I'm unorganized and lazy. So like all up in like in the beginning here, and then also during the rise, you'll hear the filter kind of do its thing. But right now it's because I didn't want the sharp clickiness to happen. I like the diffuse kind of ambient sound of things that are happening. And then we have this ARP. Look at this big old ARP. So ARPs, when I do ARPs, what I typically do is I make the sound and whatever I'm using, and then I set it to be an arpeggiator in the channel settings window by going into function and then setting up the arpeggiator. You could do that. Like you could make an arpeggio in Harmer using Harmer's internal like arpeggiator sequencer stuff. You could do that, but I'm just used to doing it like this. And like, this would also work for third-party plugins as well, because it basically just plays notes. Like it turns whatever you're doing into notes. And the default setting is for it to be sustaining whatever chords you hold down. So I just put on a chord and it works. So I'm using this low pass filter. Also this pluck. Now I have a little bit of keyboard tracking on the cutoff, but not a lot. It's not 100% keyboard tracking, which means that when I turn it down, it follows it a little bit. Like because you can see that like the higher notes have more higher in them because they go way up here, and then the lower notes it's lower down here. So when it goes low enough, eventually it will shut off almost all the sound. So it's just sort of a control thing I like to do when I'm doing ARPs. The actual sound itself, this is set to be the saw wave configuration. I have unison engaged on 9 voices, big old wide kind of thing, and I'm turning off the unison as it goes down. So like this is, you can kind of see the voice ripple a little bit when I hit the go button. And this is so that like the voices have a chance to be spread for a second, and then they collapse back down to static phase. And by static phase, I mean static pitch. If they are all the same pitch, that means that they're all going to be locked in the same phase. But while they were not, like while they were actually spread in unison, it gave the sound a chance to sort of get screwed up in phase, and then when I locked back into phase, it wasn't the original phase. It's not being brought back to the original phase. This is why I do this kind of thing. But it does keep it stable. It keeps it steady. And that's what I want out of that. Reverb delay, EQ, going into the sidechain. What else am I doing in this song? This sound? Not much. Okay. I believe I'm automating both the pluck and the filter in this. Yep. So that's a big key point. I think I used that same pattern. Like the notes that I chose are more or less the progression of the main drop, not the actual like the melodic part, the chorus. Like that has its own ARP, I think. And then but here, it's just D and then D sharp and then notes that make sense. Indeed. And then we are filtering in very slowly this other bass, but before we hear that, we hear the guitar. Now in the intro, the relationship between the guitar and the guitar's supporting bass is very obvious, and it's a little bit more apparent than it is during the actual drop in the chorus sections, but this bass was designed to fit with the guitar, and it's not actually, the bass isn't being run through a guitar thing. I don't think it is anyway. But like when we listen to like, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna like, and kill you guys as well. Like right there, you can hear it pretty good. Because like right now the guitar and the basses are all being filtered a little weirdly. So that helps you feel how the guitar and the bass and that bass are supposed to fit together. And ready your danger. Let's go, me Deathblow. Machine gun. Yeah. Let's talk about this guitar for a bit. So I covered this kind of in the arrangement part. Where's the guitar? So I'm doing the distortion in FL, like in digitally. I recorded it dry into Edison. Here's that Edison. Man, I can get rid of this, but actually before I do that though, you notice that like there's no noise. You can zoom in and we don't really see a lot, and that's because I utilized the denoising capability of Edison. Basically, this is like you would see the space be much more like colorful and diffused, kind of like the same this light blue color. You'd see that everywhere because there'd just be noise, like signal noise in the cable and from the guitar, the pickups, just noise. What Edison could do is if you select this particular area that has no like not noise content. So like right here, it would be silence, quote unquote, but there'd still be noise. If you right click this button, it says noise profile added. Like it has that's now the noise profile. And then if I click this, it'll say, okay, well, there's nothing there, but it would show you what frequencies it targets, and then it would basically cancel that noise out of the entire recorded section, effectively removing it. And it's very effective. It's very good. I mean, you can't like do 100% noise removal, and you can't like force it because you can get some interesting artifacts. But for this particular purpose, it's a very good job. So that's what I did there. File doesn't need to be there anymore. Now, dry. This is what the guitar sounds like. Yeah, that is my Schecter Damien 6-string guitar with EMG HZ pickups, Hertz. Now what I do is I have a limiter. This limiter exists pretty much just to boost the sound. It does a pretty good job, as you can hear. Now, most of the time, whenever you see me using the limiter, you hear me say, "Okay, you gotta pull back the attack on the limiter so that it doesn't add latency to the sound." And it does add latency to the sound, but I'm using this because I'm actually using the limiter. And if I were to do that, it would actually distort. It would distort the sound a bit, at least more than it is already. This isn't distorting the sound. The mastering on the track is distorting the sound. At least I think so. Yeah, that's why we're hearing distortion. But it doesn't matter because the that doesn't hear that. Yeah, that doesn't hear that while we're doing. What am I doing? While in its own mixer insert, like it doesn't. This is all before all that, so it doesn't particularly matter if it's distorting right now because we're gonna go into EQ. Now, this is a pre-distortion EQ, which means that we're pretty much shaping how the pickups are being interpreted by the distortion, because that's like one of the biggest indicators of your tone in the guitar is how your pickups behave. So, like if we have particular like these my pickups tend to be too hot in the low end and not hot enough on the high end for the particular kind of tones that I want. So I can change that because we're in digital universe and we can do this. This would be kind of like putting an EQ on your cable before you go to distortion if you have a pedal board or something. That would be what you do. And then we are using Poolin LE56. This is a free plugin. You can actually Google this and you'll find it. If you can't actually find this one in particular, that someone actually brought this to my attention on the guy's blog, because this is where he has all his downloads. It's in the amp sim pack, because there's more plugins that he has, and this is one of them that's in there. So it's free. You can just go download it. They make it for Windows and OS X, and this is what that sounds like. I turned it way down because distortion, the guitar tone emulation is two-part. I mean, real tones are two-part too. It's you have your distortion, your amp head, and then you have your cabinet. The cabinet, like a guitar speaker cabinet, is not meant to reproduce sound perfectly. It's a very specialized and very specific kind of sound recreation that is designed for guitar distortion and guitar sounds in general. And it colors the sound in a pretty specific way that when we hear it, we go, "Oh, that's a guitar." And that's what I'm using Guitar Rig for. So in Guitar Rig, this is Guitar Rig 4 because I never upgraded, but this is Guitar Rig, and I'm using the control room, which gives us a cabinet simulation. And it also gives us, this gives us how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 cabinet simulations. But really what they are 8 microphone simulations of a cabinet. In the guitar world, guitar sound design world, the process is that you you have impulses. You have cabinet impulses. And what an impulse is, it works pretty much like how convolution reverb works. The sound creation, not so much, but the end result is the same. You have impulse responses for a sound going through a cabinet, going through a microphone. Because that's another big part about sort of guitar tone capture. The kind of microphone, the angle, all like the distance and all that kind of stuff, it heavily influences how the sound sounds. So what this does, we're basically given 8 impulse responses of some cabinet that has these microphone types in front of them. You know, the Ribbon 121, which is a Royer, I think, 121, Dynamic 57, SM57, Condenser 47, Condenser 67, Dynamic 421, or MD 421, pretty common microphone. Dynamic 441, Dynamic 20, and then Ribbon 160. Like, those are all different kinds of microphones. They're pretty popular in terms of recording, so that's what this is giving us here. You kind of mix and match, and you find a tone you like. So that's what I did. EQ'd again. And there's a bunch of filters for beginning and the end, kind of like the kick drum. That's going in the sidechain channel, and it's also going in the master. This is because I want the guitars to kind of be on top of stuff, but I still want it to be mixed in a little bit, so it's getting sidechained, and it's also going to master. People have pointed out in the past that this is not necessarily like I'm changing the sidechaining amount, and you might think it is, and it might have a similar result, but you have to work with it differently. Because you're technically doubling the sound, and then like if I were to just run them both in and clean the same level, the same send volume, you can see the send volumes are different. Then whenever the sidechain happened, it would just bring it down to regular level, which you might be thinking, okay, why isn't it hilariously loud? That's because of compression, because of mastering compression and that kind of stuff. So because of that as well, it makes everything behave very differently. But you can kind of niggle around with the levels of your sidechain and master volume sends on an instrument you don't want to be primarily sidechained, and you'll find a kind of nice middle ground, and that's what I did, and it worked.
Chamber and ready or not, got a date with danger. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Me, you, and the crew down the sound of Deathblow. Chamber and ready. It's the.
Oh yeah, I changed the volume. There it is.
Step up, time to hold it in the chamber and ready.
Anyway, yes. So now there's this other bass, this guy. Actually, I guess I should talk about the guitars bass. Yeah, so this is the bass. This was, like I said, it was designed to kind of fit with the bass and the fit with the guitar. And what I wanted out of this, the reason why I did this is because I wanted to have some sort of synthy presence with the guitar, so that it was very, it's like, oh, it's metal, but it's also like merging with like the EDM world kind of thing. So it's got this sort of synthy presence, and that meant a really high frequency kind of just like filler bass sound, but that it didn't interfere with a lot, because guitars are a very mid-tone heavy thing, and they don't actually have bass. They're not a bass instrument. So they, I mean, they do have bass, but it's like high bass frequencies. It's not literally sub bass frequencies. And so this big old scoop here basically is where the guitar fits, and this big old bump up here. And then of course, the rhythm I'm actually creating using the filter modulation. Where's it? Which one is it? It's pretty early on. Or it'll probably be in the wrong list. Guitar support, look at that. Yeah, so filters. That's sub reinforcement. And that's some random sound. So, okay, let's look at what the sound is. Tiniest bit of prism engaged, but I don't think I mess with the prism shape at all. Nope, same shape. Prism amount alters wildly. So it goes down, and it goes down to 0. It goes down to the negative other way, and it comes back up. But because it's so low, the effect is noticeable, but it's not super present. Use a pitch thickness is doing the automating down thing that the ARP was doing, and this is for the same reasons, because I wanted the sound to be consistent when it's below the guitar. The sort of the movement in the sound will be accomplished just fine by the guitar's own like sonic behavior. This is totally arbitrary and useless, because this between here and here exists no harmonics. This is the fundamental tone, and this is the first harmonic. There's nothing in between here. So that did nothing. That was just there for funsies, I guess. And then this brings down some of the mid harmonics a little bit, and you sort of see what's happening. I had the phaser engaged with a custom shape, some weirdo shape that, like, this is mostly just trial and error, and I thought it sounded cool, so I went with it. Harmonic using pitch is sort of a weird thing. With the Hertz mode, this doesn't really do what I thought it would do. Like, I do this shape when I have regular unison modes, so that it gives a sort of a squelchy, cascadey kind of sound, because it's changing the rate of phase cancellation between all the harmonics. And I've explained that in past how to basses and how Harmor works. Because, I mean, remember the idea of like the Reese modulation, where a sound is like too close in pitch to one another, it will, just gonna turn the sound off on this. Yeah, that'd be smart. When the sound is too close in pitch, like really, really close in pitch, there'll be phase cancellation, because the peaks of the period will kind of line up like that every once in a while. The higher the frequency, the faster that happens. So that means that if we change the frequency of the pitch, if we change the pitch difference across all the harmonics in one total voice, that means that some will phase cancel faster than others. And if you do that, that means that you'll get this sort of cascadey pitch squelchy thing. So that's why I do this. However, Hertz mode doesn't do that, because Hertz is a different unison mode altogether. Hertz mode, see, because remember, this is additive, this is Harmor. Other unison modes are accomplished by changing the pitch of every harmonic pretty much together. But what does that mean together? Because the difference between, say, like a D and a D sharp on the lowest of the sub is like 2 hertz. It's like 2 or 3 hertz, not a lot. And then the difference between like D8 and D sharp 8 is like a lot, you know, hundreds of hertz. So that means that when you're moving one voice against another, you kind of have to scale all the frequencies so that they're all the same note. And so it's creating the unison pitch difference by note value. However, Hertz unison does it by Hertz value, which means that when you up it up a little bit and you say, okay, cool, we're moving it up by 1 hertz. You're moving it up by 1 hertz across the board for all the harmonics. So this means that your D is going to D sharp or whatever, but then D8 is going to going from like 10K hertz to like 10,001 hertz, and that's not a new note. I mean, it is a new note technically, but it doesn't sound that way. So that means we get a very weird sound. And so doing this shape, in conclusion, does not quite do the same thing I thought it did, but did do something interesting, so I kept it. That was a long explanation. Well, I covered the local EQ, and then the B part is pretty much just a sub, and the local EQ I turned off pretty much everything, but this is sine wave, so everything just a sine wave. No effects, just that. There's distortion, there's compression. It's being EQ'd, it's being compressed to be loud and in charge, and make sure the bass is stable. And it's also a little bit delayed, but this actually keeps it in line with the guitar, because remember, I have a delay introduced by the limiter in the beginning of the sound. And it's going to sidechain with the guitar. Now this guy's actually being 100% sidechained. It's not being like partially sidechained. So the guitar is the one that's going through, but the bass is still being sidechained by the kick and a snare. So that's nice. Now let's talk about this other bass. I'm going to re-enable these before I forget, because I'm sure I will. And also the ARP. So this sound is a little silly. There it is in its full glory. There appears to be 2 sounds. Oh yeah, that's right. This one is actually, I mean, it does have bass frequencies in it, but it's very slight. And what? Did I just kill it in here? I might have. No, but I reinforced it by using the carrier in the vocoder bass, because when you in that bass, I let the low end through in FM. When you go all the way back down to nothing, it's whatever original waveform that you have that's the carrier, and in this case, the sine wave. So I allowed. There it is. And such. Bass. But this guy, it's basically a top bass kind of thing. But this bass is silly because it was me trying to do something really simple and missing the point entirely when I was trying to do it. And so I ended up doing something else that I called harmonic FM, which doesn't mean anything. But so at this point, it should be obvious to you, but this whole track, this whole track is called FMRM test because it was actually designed around the vocoder bass, which we'll get to, and it's very, 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 very interesting. But this should make it pretty obvious that a big inspiration for how the track ended up and came out was Skrillex. And in particular, the track Syndicate that he did was a big inspiration. Because before I did this track, I hadn't done a whole lot of like 110 tracks that weren't glitch hop. Like, this is my first real like 110 Moomba, I guess it's called, track. And so I used that heavily as a reference. And I also used some of the Korn, Skrillex, Kill the Noise stuff as reference for mixes as well, which, I mean, they're not really one-to-one, but I said it's just references. But if you listen, if you think about it, okay, cool, you're totally trying to make a Skrillex, like a simple Skrillex FM bass. I did not get it back then. The sound I was trying to get is literally just like you are modulating a sine wave by a triangle wave and distorting it. Like, that's all it is. And so I did something vastly more complex. Now, what I did here, I have, let's see, I got operator 1 going out, which is at 8. So it's really high pitched. And I have operator 6 going out, which is at 2. And they're both being FM'd by a triangle wave at 4. And then operator 1 is also being modulated by a high harmonic, you know, the one that gives you the vocal kind of qualities. But because the fundamental tone is not fundamental tone, it's actually doing different things. So if I actually turn off 6, we get that. And there's actually a little bit of RM going on here too, but it's not something that I did for any real reason. Like, I'm just kind of like, I'll just do RM and see what happens. And then it did that, it worked. And just 6. And they kind of come together to be like a sound. It's a weird, grainy kind of like, I don't even know what sound, but like, that's what happened. So then ratio 4, which remember is not the fundamental tone, 2 is the fundamental tone. So an octave up, I am modulating 3 by 4, and then 4 by 16 on operator 5 for some reason. And like, this bass is funny. So like, it ended up being this. Remember, with the RM and all that, and it worked. That's fine. And then a big part of it was distortion. So then I EQ'd it in this weird shape because these frequencies were behaving strangely into the distortion, which is this wave shaper. And then like EQ'd it again slightly to come out, and then I compressed it a whole bunch, mostly just by creating the gain up to the limiter. And then EQ'd it again because it wasn't quite working, and then it's being filtered. This bass was like a huge disaster, like it really was, but I made it work for me, and it's an okay sound. It's just that like getting here could have been simpler. That's all there is to that. So that's what's going on in there.
It's step up time, a bullet in the chamber, and ready or not, got a date with danger. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Meet you in the crew down the sound of Deathblow. Rise up against invasion, daughters and sons of a new machine gun. 1, 2, 3, let's go. Meet you in the crew, deliver a Deathblow.
Did I turn off an automation clip or something? I don't know if this was supposed to be on, honestly.
It's step up time, a bullet in the chamber, and ready or
That's way too bassy.
It's step up time, a bullet in the chamber, and ready.
That's way too not bassy.
It's step up time, a bullet in the chamber, and ready or not, got a date.
Now let's go over to here. Yeah, so that's supposed to be off.
In the chamber, and ready or not, got a date with danger.
See, what I did is I turned on the bandpass filter right here so that, is this the bandpass filter? That's what this is. I turned it on right here so that this section could have that sort of radio equality to it. That's not supposed to be here. Everywhere else. I must have gotten rid of it by accident during one of the videos, but that's fine. I know what I'm doing. Yay. And such. So let's go back to the chronological stuff. So we pretty much covered all the sounds that happen here, and then there's vocals. And the vocal processing is a very large part, not me. I did a little bit of, I kind of explained the mixing and mastering what I did with the vocals, but the vocals were pretty much entirely Clayton. Clayton Celldweller, the man with the vocals. Anywho.
Machine gun, one, Deathblow.
Wait, actually, hold on, there's a sound I didn't do.
3, let's go. Date with
This guy.
down the sound of death.
The dupe. So here's an example of using the vocoder carrier as a sub again. Anyway, this sound is cool. That's sort of like barely there kind of sound. Like it's distorting, but like it sounds like it's almost not really there as a result of the very high level of asymmetry in the log distortion setting. This is the mono asymmetry too. But if I were to turn it up into distortion, so that's why that's fun. So this is a pitch, a whoop, a laser, a pew, a dupe, and a doodad. And I accomplished this one by doing pitch sliding up, like in the actual pitch envelope. So every note's doing this. And I'm also doing it with the slide notes. This is very interesting sounding all together. It's very high pitched. There's some unison going on. Am I doing anything in the unison? I am not. This is a very simple sound because it's very high pitched. And like the higher pitch the sound goes, like when you're getting the lead territory, the less you can really do to it to change it. That isn't something like reverb or chorus or something. Reverb or chorus or something. So that's what's up with that. And really all like if you missed the part about why the sound is what it is, there's also this guy, but this is like super less. That's that guy, but we can barely hear him. But you can see it still has an impact on it. And like what this guy does is basically just a solid note, but a really high detune amount, which causes this sort of business to happen. So it's pretty much like a solid, like real note, as opposed to all the unison and stuff and spread that's in this guy. So it keeps it stable. It's a lower harmonic, so yeah, this guy pretty much has the lowest, all the high harmonics in there. Is this one pitched down? It is pitched down. So this has a pitch multiplier, which makes it an octave lower than the other guy. So that all makes sense now. Very good. Also, this one's set to the square side, which is basically halving how many in half how many are harmonics there are active in the spectrum versus that. Of course, because it's at 16, it's so unbelievably high. That's the effect that has. Indeed. So that's the whole sound with the sub. Right, the sub.
Step up, time a bullet in the chamber. And ready or not, got a date with danger. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Meet you in the. We stand alone against the
Weird. Anyway, so then we have the rise. So, like usual, there are two risers. There is an FM riser and a hardware riser. Here I have them labeled, riser 1 to riser 2. So, this is like my usual riser configuration. I'll make a sound, and then I'll start at a very low note, and then I will use a slide note to go to a very high note. Hopefully key. I did that for these two guys. The FM riser. Normally what I'll do is I'll control FM at a very low level, and then I'll slowly increase the amount of FM as the pitch increases, which also it'll increase the FM speed, but rising in pitch also increases the FM speed because the pitches are all ratios. And then that's what's cool about that. This one is a little weird because I am doing 2 oscillators outputting that are both having FM increasing, I imagine. Yep. And I'm controlling it all by, so 1 and 6 are being modulated by 2 and 5, which have very low FM amounts. It doesn't particularly matter like how low they are. It's just that they're low, so it's important. And then I am modulating them both by X over here, and then I'm just increasing it with some automation clip. That's probably this guy. And also Y. What's the Y value? Y is probably pitch of 5 or 2? Nope. What does Y control? Such a good question. Nothing. Mod of operator 2? I am RMing it. Ha. So I'm ring modulating the FM amount into operator 1 by operator 2. So this was just a bit of interesting. This wasn't like I had this and I planned this to be like, oh, I want a specific sound. Because really what I want is just, I want a rising mess. That's what I want. I want a very high frequency for the FM version. A high frequency rising mess. And that's totally what I got. So that weird sound you hear at the end there, that sort of oddness, that's aliasing. That's when we are creating frequencies that are so high that they go beyond the Nyquist frequency. The Nyquist frequency is half of the sample rate, and because this one's in, well, right now it's in 48 kilohertz, because that's how I record my videos now. But in the song it was 44.1 kilohertz. So that means that 22.05 is the highest level, and if you go above that, it aliases. And what does that mean? Aliasing in this term means that instead of the frequencies going higher, they wrap around and go lower. And you kind of saw that a little bit in the EQ while we were watching it. So if I just start halfway over here. You kind of saw them start to bounce back a little bit. And that creates a very interesting kind of sound. And the big increase in the big whoosh at the end is actually the Valhalla shimmer that's on riser 1 that got turned on in the last second. Or at least turned on more. It's probably the mix. That's the size. Yeah, so that caused that to move around a lot. So, like the other risers that I've done with Harbor, this one is being speed modulated with the phaser. And this one I created a custom shape that has 4 of these little spaces in between. There are nice space in between, which means that this basically means the speed nom is what it means, just x4. So it's really fast, much faster than it would have been otherwise. I'm also modulating down the filter here, so that doesn't turn on until pretty much in the mid. And there it is. That was the shimmer's size being modulated. I also modulated the width. And what this does in the case of this sound is that it changes it from being a sort of a bendy kind of motion like you saw in the spectrum. Like this shape happens. And then it's sort of horizontal, and then eventually it levels out until it's straight. And then it'll be the at the end there. If you're wondering how I'm able to start the sound in between any MIDI note that I have play, it's because in the option settings I have play truncated notes on transport on, which means that it actually starts the sound wherever I play the note. In case you didn't know. Anywho, those are the two risers. They are being routed into, what are they being routed? Sidechain. And also remember I was talking about the filtered kick. That's a lot of fun. And I believe there's some sounds like there's some EQ mod. Yeah, okay. This is the master? Yes. So in the master, I have this EQ.
1, 2, 3, let's go. Me, you, and the crew deliver a Deathblow. 1, 2, 3, let's go. Me, you, and the crew deliver a Deathblow.
That's interesting. I wonder where that is. That's not the master. This is the master. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, let's go. Me, you, and the crew deliver a Deathblow.
So right at the last second there, I used the EQ to cut the high end out. This is a pretty popular practice of as a way to control the drop bass, because it makes it feel like it's big hits harder when right before it the bass kind of cuts out. And this is also where I switch maximi right here.
You and the crew
I like to not to do it right when the hit happens, because sometimes switching maximuses like that will actually hit, like it'll change the hit a little bit, and I didn't want to fuck with it. Indeed. Did I miss anything in here that I haven't covered already? I don't think I did. So now we're in the actual drop. Now, most of these sounds we already talked about, but some of them are new and cool. I think I've been making all my Making Of videos with that bandpass on, and that's like my bad. But we have this guy. This is a vocoder bass, and this is the whole point of this track, the entire point. And this was me making some of my earliest experiments utilizing ring modulation as a source in my FM processing. So I'm also, okay, so I have my bass, the usual vocoder setup. I have a carrier, the modulator that goes to the Vocodex. And then I also have the Vocodex going out to another channel, which has weird reverb on it. That's what that sound is, that like, kind of thing. I'm going to disable that for the purposes of analyzing the sound. I'll use this one, it's pretty simple. So I believe am I modulating one thing by another? I forget what I'm modulating here. Let's find out. Okay, so I loaded a vocal sample into Harmor, and I'm moving it around in time. And this is what I'm using to modulate the Vocodex. And I believe this is the You and Me sample, so let's go look at that.
You and Me.
That's the sample that's loaded here. And through the Vocodex, that sounds like this.
You and me. 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 You and me.
Yeah, so the way that this is working is that I put this in the Harmor, and then in the image tab, I scaled it all the way down so that the harmonics are stacked like this. They're snapping really hard right on there. And then turn the smooth off, speed off, all that off, the sharpness all the way down, and then I'm controlling the modulation by just modulating the speed wheel by itself. I also fucked around with the detune to kind of get where it is, and like I also modulated it a little bit, just kind of screw around with it. And then I also messed around with the image format mutation, which is what this is. As you see, it had the formats turned down, and the mix is all the way off. So that means that I didn't like what I did there. It's fine. That's what it sounded like. I didn't like it. So I did that, and it has no effect on the sound. Good to know. So that's what that sounds like. Now let's talk about the carrier. Carrier has arrived. I'll go back into the Vocodex. So turn you off, turn you back on, and then low pass you all the way up. There she blows. Yeah, so in typically impossibly sharp fashion, that's what the carrier sounds like. That's not this guy, right? Well, it is actually, but it's turned all the way down because of modulation. So, this is actually one of my regular FM patches, except that I am modulating with ring modulation some of the parameters that are here. So in the original patch, what this was that I modulated 2 by 1, and the 2 was a triangle with a whole bunch of stuff involved, and it's got these harmonics engaged in the tiniest other harmonics. I don't even know how much they affect the sound, but they're there. The phase is different. The phase is different on a lot of these. And then it's modulated again by a separate operator with, again, more harmonics and more phase. And then that is also like parallel modulated by another operator, which is just a sine wave at the fundamental tone with a big old phase change. And then 6 is the 6 is ring modulating, but it's FMing itself. That's odd. I don't know why I'm doing that, but that's what's up. 6 used to just be the sine wave that would go out and reinforce the sub. And that's actually a job of 4 now, which isn't doing anything, I don't think. Nope. And so that's what 4 is doing. That's why this little block is here, because it used to be 6. But I can just get rid of it completely. And ring modulation have this shape in 6. So this is the even and half shape. If you've seen any of my recent how to bases, this should be pretty familiar to you. This was like the first time I ever tried this. Except that now the effect on this is not what I expected it to be, because I'm FMing it by itself. It's feedbacking. That's very interesting. I'll have to kind of investigate that later, because I don't remember doing that on purpose. In fact, I probably tried to FM this by like 5 and missed. I've done that before. So that's interesting. But the basic premise here is that we're modulating 2, which is the primary FMing operator. 2 is going into 1, which is going out. So everything goes into 2. So if we modulate that, then we're basically switching the ring modulation on and off. But because we're FMing it by itself, it's gonna do weird things. But this is the first experimentation of that. There are actually no effects on either the carrier or the modulator. They're going straight into Vocodex as they are. Now in the Vocodex, like what I do usually, I'll have the carrier turned on, but I'll low pass it. And that big old sine sub you're hearing is when the modulation is all the way down on Citrus, because I'm controlling the modulation by modulation X. I'm automating it, and when X is all the way down, it's just a sine wave. So I'll low pass it so that the low end goes through. So the Vocodex, when it's all together, it'll work out pretty good. Now, what am I doing in here? So I'm probably messing with the modulator pitch. Yes, so it's turned down. The bandwidth is set to be different. Am I modulating anything to do with Vocodex? No, I'm modulating X and Y in the carrier, and then I'm modulating the speed, or the time positioning, and also the harmonic detune and harmor. X and Y. So in the case of this, Y controls. That's very interesting. X also controls very lightly the amount of FM going into operator 2, so that's gonna actually attenuate the ring modulation just slightly. But I believe the volume of operator 5 is what Y is controlling. Oh yeah, so volume of operator 4, which is the sine that just goes up to reinforce everything, is going up. It goes up like this because when, like I said, when there is no FM, the original sine wave is just a sine wave. But when there is FM, it gets very far away from being a sine wave. So that means that you lose some of the sine wave definition of the original sub frequencies. So that's why we have to reinforce it with this. It's not just straight. It's not just on all the time, because then it would sound uneven. So we have to bring it on as FM increases. But we also control the volume of operator 5 with Y here, and that adds in, like, that creates additional modulation, and it sort of screws with it, makes the sound glur for a second, or not for a second, it just does for a while. So that means that when Y goes on, it's more gurgly, and when it's less gurgly. So that's why we have Y modulation. and such. So back to Vocodex. So Vocodex is static. It's not being modulated. It's not changing. So I have this pitch setting. It's also kind of low, like it's being turned down. With the actual main pitch, this is the per band pitch. So that means that when there's a band that's here that's a particular pitch, it gets pushed down. That's particularly cool because that's how you handle pitch in vocoders with bands. Is that the band's position is 100% related to the pitch of the modulator. And then I'm also changing the band width a whole bunch, just controlling it, being positioning. It's mostly larger, as you see, it's a bit higher, but somewhat higher than others. And this is mostly to set the taste. This is also a very low band vocoder preset setup. Like I have it at 27 as opposed to the usual 40, 47 is the default, and I usually have it higher, like 60 or something. But this sounded pretty good at a low band rate. That's why I did that. Didn't change the distribution, didn't change much else. The band gain multiplier is all over the place. Mostly that I wanted the higher frequencies brought up a bit because there weren't a lot. But that's okay because I compressed the hell out of it, which meant that a lot of the frequencies that were lower were brought up higher. It's also the tiny bit of EQ. It was a very specific kind of EQ actually. Fixed some frequency problems that were existed in the beginning. And then an Edison, because I think I tried to resample this. Yeah. I forget what I was doing with that, but I guess I was trying to come up with some new bass. I must have tried to resample an earlier version of this, but to no avail. And then another EQ. Huh. See, the problem with doing very specific EQs like this is that it kind of uses all your nodes. So then when you want to do broader things with more, you kind of need to have more nodes. That's why I guess I did that. But this is sort of ill-advised. You want to try and like accomplish what you want to do with just a EQ. You know what I mean? But I mean, to hell with rules, right? Anyway, the output of the Vocodex is going into this strange reverb channel, which has some EQ that keeps it mostly to the high levels, and the big old reverb, and then a bigger EQ to keep the resulting reverbs that spread around be a bit higher, and then the shimmer, which makes it sound weird. That's what that sound is. And all of that's coming into the side chain, it's being side chained. It's pretty cool. Remember, this sound is the same as this sound. And also, the bass beneath this is still the vocoder. And in fact, the bass beneath the Skrillex bass is actually still the vocoder. And such. So let's skip over to the chorus where there's more things that I've done. We stand alone against the So there's two big groups of stuff happening here. The first big group is that this is the strings. And this is East-West Play. This is East-West Quantum Leap Symphonic Orchestra. And I'm using one of the string ensemble patches. So that means that it's just one patch. And it has a whole range of strings, as opposed to using 4 individual ones like I did for Codename Hurricane. But this was mostly because I knew I wasn't going to get very in-depth. It wasn't going to be very present. It was mostly just going to be in reinforcing the background with stuff. And so I did. There's a EQ on it. There's actually no reverb at all on the sound. I tried to have some reverb, but I decided I didn't want any reverb. This is mostly here to reinforce the synths, which are all in this pattern. I'm using an automation clip. I discussed this in the mixing and mastering and also the rearrangement. I'm using this to bring in the leads. It's like right here. You actually are seeing there's another lead in here, and I tried to have some harmonies involved, but it didn't really work out so well, so I didn't use it. But this is the sound. That's the lead. All right, so this is a super saw patch. So I have both parts engaged with differing amounts of unison voices and unison pitch and depth and all that, because that's how you do a super saw. Is you have lots of voices and they're all different. So that's pretty much why that there is what that is. And like I just put them there and moved them around until they got to be where I wanted to be. They both have different harmonic unison pitch windows, but they both share a common trait, and that's that there's less on the high frequencies. This is to preserve the sharpness of what would have been a saw wave. The low frequencies can do whatever they want, but if the high frequencies are still, like, enough of the high frequencies, not just the highest frequencies. But if the high frequencies are unaltered, or at least a little bit altered, then you still get the sharpness of the sound as a result. It's very cool. So one is a 1 and one is a 2, so they're both at octaves. That's very interesting. Both at the same kind of octave, 2, 1. That's weird. They're probably originally different pitches, and they accidentally turned on part linking and then moved them around until they're the same, and then now they're the same. I've done that before. They both got the phasers engaged into frequency mode. Now, the frequency mode of the phaser basically is the same thing as the real phaser, only instead of controlling modulation and amplitude, it modulates the same exact modulation and pitch. So I'm using this as kind of an extremely advanced vibrato. And I'm also using vibrato. So I'm using all these weird pitch changing things all together to create the big pitch cloud, which is how you do a super saw. And so here's the vibrato, the different speeds, different depths. And I'm also using the harmonizer at the mostly default. This guy's at X3 instead of X2, which has an effect. I'm not totally sure what. I just want it to be different. Then lots of chorus also, because again, spreading pitch changes, distortion, reverb. I'm pretty sure the chorus is before distortion. Yes, it is, because you can change the order of the effects units just by scrolling. Then it's compressed. Then it's in a parametric EQ, and it goes out. And that's this guy. Now the other dude. So right off the bat, we see that I have this harmonic unison pitch thickness envelope that goes down, so that it starts off really high, and then so there's a little bit of more pitch warble, then it goes down, and it's still pretty low, but it's more stable than it would have been otherwise. And of course, by then, the shimmer kicks in, which is the result of turning feedback on and off, and then putting the shift up all the way up to the top. That's what that does, and it's badass. So big unison, that. The unison isn't being changed, it's just even the whole way through. The phaser width is changing. So it changes over time. That's what that business is. That we're seeing here. That's the result of the phaser width change. Custom phaser shape, which looks kind of weird. And this is not something that I planned. Again, this is just, I digged around until I found something that sounded cool. Big old harmonizer. Again, with X3 and X1, I still don't know what that means. The manual tells you what that does. It does. It does tell you what it does. And I did read it at one point. I'm pretty sure I read it for pretty much the last time I did a Harmor tutorial, which was for the harmonizer, and I forgot. I largely just dig around until, I find something that sounds cool. Because sometimes, like, you are obviously helped by knowing what you're doing, but you don't need to know what you're doing to get something cool. It's just cool that if you know what you did, so that if you want to do it again later, you can. But most of the time, I just stick around until I find something that works. But still using stuff like tools I know that I'm doing with. That's all that's happening with this sound. That's pretty much all that it needs to be, because it's going in the shimmer, making this big, huge mess, and that facilitates it being a sort of the mid saw frequencies for this whole shebang. And now there's absolutely nothing new past this point. I'm pretty sure I dicked up some of these sounds just by looking at them. It's kind of like particles, like electrons. The act of observing it changes it. But that's okay, because I'm not going to save this project file. Yeah, nothing new happens after this. This is all the same sounds and all that good stuff. So we pretty much covered everything that happens in this track. Cool. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know, and I will try to answer them. And as usual, have a nice day. Also, I have a t-shirt. If you didn't know that, I have a t-shirt for sale, shale shirts, selling t-shirts. I have a t-shirt for sale. It's up at the Fix store. You can pre-order it. If you bought the album from the Fix store, you actually get a $3 discount. You should have had that emailed to you by whatever email you used to buy the album. And also pre-ordering it makes it's $18 instead of $20, which it will be when it's actually available for sale. But available to be shipped, I should say. So there'll be a link in the description for that. I implore you to check it out because I like money, and I'm pretty sure you like t-shirts because we all wear them. You know what I mean? And it's a Seamless t-shirt, so that's cool. It's part of history. And if you have any questions about any of that as well, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.